And welcome to this Houston Newsmakers Extra. I've been talking with the Drs. Mark Jones and Brandon Rottinghouse, political science experts from University of Houston and Rice University, the Baker Institute. You know, one of the districts we want to talk about, congressional district, is the 2nd congressional district. Dan Crenshaw, and of course he's being challenged by Democrat Seema Larjavardyan. Crenshaw's had quite a national identity. Is there any chance that he is in trouble in that district at all, or is this just kind of a good showing maybe by Ms. Larjavardyan and maybe not going to happen? Brandon?
I think it'll be a good show by the Democrats. They definitely have worked the ground and have been successful at getting a strong grassroots operation going, not just this cycle, but also sort of building on what happened last cycle. But as you say, this is a nationalized race, and they haven't necessarily rose to that occasion. They might be able to in the future, but it hasn't happened yet. Looking at the voting patterns, you can definitely see a huge spike in Latino vote in Kingwood, and there are a bunch of blue Democratic voters in the first couple of days in early voting in that district, which is unusually shaped. So you've got a mix of sort of suburban Kingwood and sort of urban Houston. So there's a chance that Democrats could do well, but the problem so far has been just that Dan Crenshaw has outraised her and outspent her almost 3-1. So it's going to be a tough uphill battle for Dems.
Mark?
Oh, yeah, I don't think this seat's going to flip. Seema Larjavardyan's run a good race, but Dan Crenshaw is a very strong candidate. And Congressional District 2 has a natural Republican tilt of somewhere between 5 and 10 points. And Crenshaw outperforms the Republican baseline, meaning Donald Trump would really have to drag Republicans down far more than he presently is for Crenshaw to lose that race. We also, while I haven't been polling Congressional District 2 and I haven't seen any public polls, the fact that Crenshaw hasn't been going negative on Larjavardyan indicates to me that his internal polls don't show him at any risk. If we start to see him go negative on her for, say, her family's ties with the Iranian government, something along those lines, then we know that he's feeling a little at risk. But I haven't seen that thus far, so I think that one's pretty safe for Dan Crenshaw.
Brandon, you talked earlier about some of the chances maybe in the state house. Democrats are hoping to flip some of those. Which state house races here locally that we might be familiar with are the ones that kind of stick out to you?
Well, the biggest ones for me are going to be the ones in West Houston. This is Gina Connolly's district and 132. She's running a re-election against Mike Schofield. That was a race that had a kind of slow start. She didn't raise a lot of money at first, but she's caught up, and you can definitely see that there's a booming amount of activity out there. It's really sort of a whole new Houston, and that's really drawn in a lot of voters. In fact, looking at the numbers, you can definitely see that there are a lot of people who don't traditionally vote in primaries. It may be that they're all new voters. So this is really going to be, I think, a big chance for the Democrats to hold a seat they have to hold. Getting a little bit into the loop, you can see in 134, Sarah Davis, the Republican, is sort of fighting for her life. Ann Johnson is running an aggressive campaign against her in a year where being a Republican on a ticket, even a moderate Republican like Sarah Davis, can be a real problem. So those are a couple of seats to watch that the Democrats need to hold and Republicans would very much like to hold and Dems would like to take.
So Mark, the ones he talked about, interesting that both in the Kalani race, Schofield race, and Sarah Davis and Ann Johnson, they've run against each other before. It's not the first time, and so they are familiar with each other. What do you think your take on that chance of flipping is in those districts? I
think Schofield's going to have a real tough haul to try to flip Kalani, but it's possible. Sarah Davis, she's someone that is really going to depend on the voters in the district. That's a district that is now a Democratic district. Sarah Davis wins it in spite of being a Republican. And the question will be, are there still enough voters who are willing to vote Democrat up and down the ballot, but when they get to 134, vote for Sarah Davis over Ann Johnson? It's a tough question. I think this could be the election where we lose the one pro-choice Republican in the entire Texas legislature. I'd add to those as well, 26 out in Fort Bend County, where it's a Republican seat, but it's open. J.C. Jatan is the Republican who was recruited by Governor Abbott. He's an Asian American. He was chosen or selected by Governor Abbott and supported by Governor Abbott because he represents the diversity of the district in part. And he's facing Sarah DeMarchant. That's a district that Republicans have to hold if they're going to keep control of the Texas House. And then inside the loop, I'd also look at 138. which is Akila Basie's the Democrat versus Lacey Hull, the Republican. It's a Republican seat, but one the Republican who retired, Dwayne Boack, run by a very narrow margin. Those are races that are really going to determine who controls the Texas House in 2021.
So before I let you go, let's talk about the changing face of the parties. It seems like here in this state, the Democratic Party has changed, is changing quite a bit. And the Republican Party, because of the influence of Donald Trump, has changed quite a bit as well. How do you see those parties evolving in the years to come? Are we seeing the beginning of a change in control within this state as a result of what's happened over the last 3 years?
Well, I think a lot depends on where the Republican Party in Texas decides to go. If the Republican Party recognizes that Texas is an increasingly diverse state and that if they're going to win, they need to reach out and have both Latino and Asian American and African American candidates and supporters and becomes a more inclusive party, then they have a chance to retain control over the next decade. If, on the other hand, they tend to go down a narrow short-term path where all they do is appeal to the Anglo base that shrinks with every passing year, then we're going to find Democrats in control in Austin in the near term.
Brandon?
Yeah, I agree with Mark. I think that the Democrats are reacting to these national trends, which has often been the way that you've seen states flip. The problem for the Republicans is that Donald Trump has fundamentally altered the party. But I also tell people that Donald Trump changed the Democratic Party as much as he changed the Republican Party. So you're going to see the Democrats reacting to all of this. And that's successful for now. But the gains that they make now won't last. And it never does. Every time you have these big sweeps, there's always a kind of, resweep or readjustment. So Texas will be a big battleground for a long time in the way that, say, Florida is or that Virginia is. But the Democrats, or the Republicans rather, are really in jeopardy of becoming like a regional brand, like a Winn-Dixie or a Dairy Queen or something, where it only can be seen by a few people. And the problem is for them is that that's not the way that they've traditionally won elections since, the mid-1990s. So they're going to have to, as Mark says, to rebrand themselves and figure out how to be more inclusive, or they're not going to be successful in a very different Texas in 2022, 2024 and beyond.
It seems to me that there's so much going on, it's difficult to tell where the truth lies. You get that sense that there's so much misinformation that's going on out there from candidates and from other sources. It seems to me that's going to be one of the bigger challenges going forward. You guys agree?
Well, yeah. I think, and then also we're going to be probably looking at a time where Donald Trump is no longer in the White House, and that will change things for Texas Democrats, because just as it was advantageous to Texas Republicans to have Barack Obama in the White House who they can't campaign against, Texas Democrats have benefited from Donald Trump being omnipresent and having his policies, attitudes, positions, and rhetoric drive much of the message. With him gone, that advantage is going to be at least slightly reduced, and Democrats may find themselves with 2020 being a high water mark for the next few years if Democrats in Washington turn things too far to the left in the eyes of the median Texas voter.
We're in for a very grim future if we are on the same path that we're on. Donald Trump has certainly exacerbated the tensions in this country, but we have to fundamentally rethink how we offer civics education and government education for young people. We need to be better at teaching them empathy. We need to teach them how to be able to work together on problems. You can't simply ignore people in real life like you can on Twitter that you don't agree with politically. So we've got to be able to move beyond that. And like you said, there's a real problem of misinformation, and teaching younger people to look through the problems and to really, see past some of this misinformation and have an analytical strategy to be able to find out what the truth is really critical. And if we can't do that, then it doesn't matter who's president, because it's going to be fundamentally that we're at war with each other all the time politically. Well
said. Thank you, Dr. Brandon Rottinghouse, Dr. Mark Jones. Always appreciate your insight. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching this Houston Newsmakers Extra. Share it with everybody you know. Thank you, gentlemen.